welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to San Haroldo Zoo. I'm really excited today because we're going to be talking about and breaking ground on this area right over here, which is going to become the Open Savanna section of the park. Now, this section is really important, not only because it's going to house our giraffes and it's kind of the newer version of the San Diego Zoo's giraffe area, which is kind of small and is another reason why people think that the urban jungle needs to be renovated. But also, I'm actually going to be emulating one of my favorite giraffe exhibits, which is from the San Francisco Zoo. And it will be essentially a portal to all the other African sections of the park. Let me go and get down from the tree here a little bit. Over beyond yonder here is going to be what will be my version of Africa Rocks. So we're going to have the African penguins and other animals over there. And then beyond that, which we can't see now, is going to be the Elephant Odyssey, or at least my version of the Elephant Odyssey, which I've been really excited to do ever since the game launched. And so, because elephants are definitely one of my favorite animals, so I'm really excited to do that. And now I'm stuck in the tree. Well, that is a first. Tejikam, you have failed me. All right, here we go. So, basically what's going to happen is I'm going to break ground over here, and we're going to be setting ourselves up because they're coming off of the, we've got the Gemsbach over here. Australia is kind of this this whole section over here, and then we've got this being sort of the last stop, because the front entrance we've got like gift shop and cafes and all that sort of stuff, and then over on this end we've got the Koala Cafe, and really once they get over here we're going to be hitting sort of I'm going to be creating some rocky outcroppings here, kind of to emulate sort of the rocks that appear in the middle of the savannah, and then it's just going to be like giraffes, and I believe Thomson gazelle is also going to put with them because the reticulated giraffes we have live in a similar area to them. And also I'm going to put a few ostriches in there too because I've really wanted to use ostriches, and this is the perfect opportunity for it. So let me go ahead and cut to sort of our overview here so we can begin our planning. All right, so now we've got an overview of what will eventually be the Open Savanna exhibit. As you can see towards the bottom center middle there, we have the Gemsbach exhibit that we were just standing by. And we really want to fill this whole area as much as possible with the Open Savanna. We want, it's not a very big space, so we want to make sure that we really maximize the amount of space that the animals have, as well as backstage access. So what we really want to do is we want to fill this whole area as much as possible. And something really cool I want to do with this exhibit is something that the Savannah exhibit at the San Francisco Zoo does, and that is they have land bridges. Now, there's a lot of different zoos that do different kinds of land bridges all across the world. But what's really cool about the San Francisco Zoo is that it's not just one land bridge and you're done and you go under and that's it. They have this little oasis right through the middle. So you actually have two land bridges, and you pop out in the middle, and on both sides, just surrounding you, is serene savanna. They, of course, are on the California coast, so they've got these wonderful like eucalyptus trees and palm trees, which is not really the African savanna vibe, but I think I'm going to go with that anyway because this park is indeed in California. So it would make sense that I would have a little bit of that vibe, the natural plants that would be in our area here. And so I'm definitely going to go for that. And so they're going to be popping out on this little oasis, little water feature in the middle there. And then they'll be able to look out on both sides of the savannah there. Now, the first view of the exhibit is coming out of the Australia section by the gift shop that's over there. And so I really want to set that up nice. I've already talked about having sort of a copy rock formations out front to kind of break up that area, mask it off a little bit. But right at the bottom of this area here, I want to create a nice platform kind of deck area. Not only will this introduce the open savanna to the guests, but also it will provide an opportunity for like giraffe feedings as well. And I think I'm actually going to try and make it so that a presenter in-game can go there, one of the education people can go there and present to kind of draw guests over in that direction. So I'm definitely going to include that at the bottom there. I'm also going to include sort of a water feature here. I'm not exactly sure. I know that I want to include the monorail and have it come over on the right side here and kind of over this water feature, since water is really used to create natural barriers for the animals. I want to kind of keep the animals away from the monorail as much as possible, so we're going to use that as our natural barrier. And also here we're going to see that the giraffe and smaller hoofstock barns are going to go on kind of opposite ends of the exhibit. The giraffes are going to be over on the right here, and I'm really looking forward to sort of emulating my version of the San Francisco Zoo's giraffe barn, because it's such this gorgeous like wood barn. And I actually think I'm going to use the Arctic wood pieces for the first time. It hasn't really been usable for me at this point for a lot of the rest of the zoo. But that wood and then the new African wood pieces that we got, I think will be really useful to build that barn, because they're flexi color, and I can work those with the previously unusable Arctic wood pieces. So we'll see how that one goes. That'll definitely be in phase 2. And we're going to have the smaller yard on the left to sort of more or less to separate off and give a little bit of a backstage access for the smaller gazelle and ostrich that are also going to be in the exhibit. Additionally, we're going to have the guests be coming out on the other side, and there's going to be in the little purple area there's going to be a bit of a rest stop, sort of a grab-and-go snack shack. I know that we came off and we have the big cafe there. This one will kind of be sort of safari themed. It's like oh, the last trading outpost before you go on your safari, and so you're either going to go left down into the African Rocks Canyon, or Africa Rocks Canyon, or you're going to go right up towards Elephant Odyssey. And actually going right will also lead you into this little blue section here, which will be the African Aviary. I was really inspired by, there's a couple of different aviaries. There's one actually in San Francisco Zoo that is an African aviary, and then there's also one at the San Diego Zoo. It's not wildlife park anymore, it's the safari park. But I definitely want to create some of this, like this walk-through exhibit with some of these bigger birds. And so far, we don't have birds in the game. I might substitute sort of a birds of the world vibe, because I know that that's the one that's at the safari park. So I might actually delve into and download some of the mods as well and get like ibis and other things in that exhibit. But I just really want to create this sort of chain link wood low to the ground sort of experience that you can walk through and go that way as well. And then on the left here we'll see the canyon that will eventually be where the wild dogs will go, the painted dogs. I know in the San Diego Zoo, they have Hamadryas baboons in this beautiful, cool canyon there. And we don't have Hamadryas baboons. We have the mandrills, but they don't really... I'm not as excited by that. What I am excited about is creating this really cool sort of extended pack canyon for the wild dogs right there in that green spot. And of course, in order to do that, we'll need our backstage access, which we've already created a backstage road starting up behind the Sun Bear Forest over there. And they'll connect to this gray area here, and we'll have our red housing for not only the wild dogs but also the small hoofstock access, and then also we'll have another separate housing area for our dingoes, sort of a mating shed, as it were, to really, not really mating, that sounds awful, more or less a birthing area for if one of the dogs needs to get away and birth in private, since that is part of the mating program that we're starting here with the dingoes. So that, in a nutshell, is the overview of this exhibit. The biggest struggle we're going to have to deal with is getting the sightlines to work. I don't really want somebody to come out and see the open savanna and go, wow, there's buildings on the other side. I see cages, all that sort of stuff. The whole point of the open savanna is you come out and think, oh my gosh, there is an entire world over there. There's hills, there's animals, and let's go explore it. And when they come out in the middle, they're not going to see either side. They're going to only see the animals and the hills and the trees. So it's going to really come down to terraforming, and we'll see if we can make that work out for us. All right, here we are with the first phase of planning. I really wanted to start with the deck here because it really sets the mood for the whole area. And because I really wanted to start with the terraforming and get the paths in, I needed to check to make sure that the sight lines were set up. And as it stands, it looks like you'll be able to essentially see into what would eventually be Elephant Odyssey, but the whole of Africa Rocks and the backstage there, which we're going to, of course, add more foliage and rock work and things like that, but it's essentially going to be hidden by this viewpoint here, by the way that the pathing and the terraforming is. Of course, we got a giraffe in here for a little scale. I definitely love the ability we have now to make them not escape, because I've just got a simple invisible barrier here. Keeps this guy right in front so that I can use him for reference. But we're going to finish up rock work under here, put some pylons, make it all look really good. Oop, I missed a little spot there. That's all right. And this will be essentially people's first view of the open savanna. They'll be coming in from this way. And I'm really going to do some foliage work, some rock work right here to kind of break up the visual here. Even though there's not a lot to see from this direction, I kind of want the attention to be drawn towards this area here, with the, to use the theme park term, weenie, the weenie of a rock structure here, kind of making people question what could possibly be over here. They'll kind of meander through them and end up here with their first look of the hoofstock and ostriches. But then they'll be able to meander here. We'll connect this up. They'll be able to meander over here. And down this gradual slope, we'll put some fences in, and they're going to go under the first of two tunnels. Now, I decided to put a couple of exhibits in here. We're going to use rocks, and I think the plaster pieces to act as concrete to make a more contained look here. Obviously, this is really tall right now, but when we put in all the scenery and stuff, this is going to look really natural, and just like the tunnel that is in the San Francisco Zoo. We'll put a couple of exhibits there, maybe some signage here, too, as they're kind of coming around this corner and out onto the plaza here, which is kind of this wooden dock-like thing, and there's going to be water down here. We're going to put fencing, and they're going to get two great views. One of sort of, I'm thinking a little bit of a trickling stream or waterfall element right here. I'm still thinking of lowering this overall back level here so that we can have a more realistic water feature. Or maybe just bringing the water feature out a little bit more, because I do really want to bring the monorail over this, and the water feature will keep the animals at bay, so they're not running into, especially the giraffes, so they're not running into the monorail. But that's the one view on this side, and on this side We'll have a little bit more of a rocky scape. I'm probably going to bring this down a little bit so that's not too up in your face, but it's a lot more contained, and you'll see sort of this more framed, picturesque version of the savanna. It'll be more shady over here. The grove of eucalyptus and palms are going to put over here. And of course, we're going to be squeezing in the backstage here as well. Honestly, I originally had planned to pave all of this. I might just straight up put a little pathway on the other side of the hyena exhibit here with the hoofstock sort of hoofstock area, backstage area, kind of encapsulating this area. So give them a little bit of a barrier, but I don't think that there's too much of a problem with having small hoofstock nearby the hyenas. They put animals and prey near each other all the time in zoos. I think that there's a few exceptions to that rule where it really stresses them out, but I think for the most part, once they realize that they are not in any danger, then they will be fine. But I'll do a little bit more research on that as we're moving forward. And then, of course, once you come off of this open plaza here, you're going to come down into another tunnel. And this is where I had the most difficulty here, as I had this originally going down much further. But the problem is that the rest of the African Odyssey, or the Elephant Odyssey, is going to be up here on this level because it matches more or less with the bridge there. Is actually going to be much higher, so we're going to have much more of a slope up here. And I didn't want to start it because I think this is where I originally had it down here. That's a long way up to gradually slope. So what I decided to do was to do a sort of hitchback here to gradually bring them up to where I'm going to be having the rest stop area here. And I'm thinking, actually, I originally had the giraffe barn over here, and I'm not sure. I think I'd really like to have some sort of guest interaction with them, like they can walk into a small side of the barn and see the interior of it. So I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to maybe move the barn over here, or just use all of this space to kind of bring it gradually up, build the aviary here, and then have a side trail between the aviary and the barn so that people who are afraid of birds don't have to deal with that. But then they can also have access to the barn to see things. And of course, we're going to be putting backstage in here as well, so they'll have access to the main road over here. So going so far so good. I'm really glad that my idea of the terraforming actually works, because I was really worried that it was not going to look as good. But so far, especially putting the plants there to kind of give me a vibe of what this area is going to look like, I'm really looking forward to seeing how I can make these tunnels look more realistic and sort of get the animals in here and see how they interact with it. All right, folks, here we are on the next update. We've got the southern entrance of the savanna nearly complete, with maybe the exception of some foliage. We've got a nice wooden fence in here on the right to kind of block off the overlook at the entrance of the savanna. And I've been using these electric fence pieces pretty much exclusively in the zoo for a while now, just because I love the cable look that it gives. I really wish we had some small cables like that in the game. But instead of using like chain link or mesh pieces for this, it looks so much more open and invisible. I would just as soon go without any fence here, but I'm pretty sure we still need something here to stop the giraffes from hiking it over this hill. And as we come in and enter through here, we've got the tunnel under the overpass right above us. We've got the walkway for the giraffes and other hoofstock. We've got a couple of our exhibits here for I believe it's the Goliath beetle and the giant snail. I went light on the theming in here. I tend to stick a lot more to what would be realistic, and realistically they would just bake a concrete tunnel. We've got some air vents and lights to provide air and light respectively. But as you're walking through here, as you come around the right, here we've got a bit of an exhibit on African art and on the savanna that you're about to walk into. So we've got some of the art pieces from the game. I've never gotten to use these, so I'm excited to finally get to throw them in somewhere. And otherwise, this would just be a blank wall. So it really sets the mood here that you're walking into a world that is very different from the North America that this zoo is placed in. And of course, we've got a nice infographic about the savanna with the 3 animals that you're going to see listed out there. And as you come out of the tunnel here, we come into the open savanna. Now, of course, we still need to add a whole bunch of work in the foliage on the left and right here, but as you can see, we've got the deck pretty much in. We put in the barriers and included a little bit of an overhang here. The overhang is not only to prevent any animals from walking up, though the water is pretty much there to stop the animals, but it's also to help add an additional barrier for people climbing over. And also, this is a cool little spot that I decided to add in. They do have a spot like this in the San Francisco Zoo, and I know they have a couple of spots like this in the San Diego Zoo. But in the larger hoofstock areas, they have sort of like these hidey hole areas for these smaller animals. So the Thompson gazelle that's in this exhibit can actually get in here and have a bit of a reprieve from the larger giraffe and their stomping grounds. And of course, I put in a little enrichment here so that once that's filled, it'll entice them to come in here and have the people come right up to the glass here. I was going to continue the mesh and the fencing through here, and I would have liked to do that, but because of how close it is, they could still definitely jump that gap. So this is a little bit higher and stops them from doing so. But as you can see here, we are shoring up the rock work on this side as well. We've got a lot of plants in here, sort of the planters in the rock work as well. I used a bit of the technique here that's going around, which is using the faux plant, what do you call it, tree trunk pieces, in order to create this sort of sandy structure here. Because zoos often have a more of a structure like this rather than just straight up rock work in their exhibits. And it definitely replicates what you'd see in real life. And over here we've got a sandy shore, and well, to be quite honest, the terrain wasn't really working with me. So instead of trying to like hide this all away and make this all water, I did what they would normally do in zoos and actually blocked off the area by just throwing a bunch of refuge over here so that the animals pretty much stay on this side and don't venture past. Especially with the waterfront the way it is, the giraffes are definitely not water loving creatures. Like, they'll come to the water's edge obviously to drink, but they do not go in the water. And zoos everywhere use moats almost exclusively for giraffes. One, because you don't have to put a big fence in front between the people and the giraffes, but two, because they're known for not being very fond of water in general. So by doing that, you can actually keep the giraffes like right here, and they'll be right next to the people, and it'll be a really cool experience for anybody who's coming through here. And while I'm still working on the plant life over here, and I think I'll be working on that for some time now because it's such a large exhibit, I did finalize what the overlook here is going to look like. And again, we're going to be finishing this off with pathway. We're going to have rock work here to make sort of an African copy, which are these, I actually probably have a rock outcropping here as well, but the copies are these big rocky outcrops that kind of appear in the middle of the savanna, and in a way kind of act like an oasis for smaller animals, kind of in the same way we created that little oasis over there for the Thompson's gazelle. And so they create these little hierarchies of animals that are in their own little element there. But yeah, so that's what we've got so far. I think the next step, before we end this episode, I'm going to finish off the other side of this tunnel here. As you can see there, that's basically what it looks like. There's so much space between the path and the ceiling, where the terrain would only let you go that far. It's such a huge gap. So you have to fill that all with rock work and concrete in order for it to look more realistic. But I think I'll finish that off, and I will probably add the other water feature, which will be up here, and will be actually connecting where the monorail comes in. It's going to come around this area. I think I'm going to actually build that one a more of a concrete trough. I went more with a naturalistic vibe with the naturalistic substrates down here, just because I love the look of it, and also it's easier. But I think up here, where it's not going to be as visible to anybody except if you're on the monorail, I'm going to create more of a concrete trough. Again, to create that water barrier to specifically stop the giraffes from running their heads into the monorail. So that's going to be it for this iteration, and I think let's just get into the next one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are on the final leg of this episode. Got actually a lot done. Oh, he is very busy. Bye. We'll see you in a second. So we're actually here at the northern entrance of the open savanna, and I'm still got a lot of work to do on this end. We're going to add some railing and stuff on this side, but that's going to come in when we work on the giraffe barn over here. But as we're coming through, we have the whole tunnel here done. And we've got these wonderful mosaics that are on the workshop. I'll put a thank you in the bio below with a little bit of information about them. Just kind of setting the tone on this side as well as we have on the other side. But as we come through, we've got the rock work, and we're out into the open savanna with a couple of our giraffes here. And my God, I love how this all turned out. So, of course, it's exactly as I wanted. The giraffes, the ostrich, the Thompson's gazelle can all come right down to the water's edge here. They don't really go any further. The ostrich might come up in the water a little bit more than the other animals, but again, the fencing here kind of stops them. We've got some of the plant work and extra branches here to kind of keep them at bay on either side. And I'll really put in a lot of rock work on this side to really make it seem as naturalistic as possible. I decided to have some rocks come in on the exhibit there to kind of block it off so it wasn't so open. So we put a nice rest area there, and the guests will have to walk around that because I've got trash cans all in there so that they don't walk through the rock. But as you can see here, this is exactly the kind of vibe we're going for. You walk out and you just are surrounded by the African savanna here. We have a sort of a dry riverbed going on here. I was going to try and put in some actual water effects here. It just didn't give the right vibe for me. I prefer the sort of the dry look. The water effects looked too tropical, too gushy, and it just didn't give off the right vibe. So I went with the dry look. It is set up so that the water feature up there, which I will show you in a second, if it were to overflow or they needed to flush it or whatever, the water would come down here into the central plaza. But as you can see here, we've got our overpasses. Oh, nice spot to sleep, giraffe. Gosh, they always look like they're breaking their necks when they do that. Just looks like it hurts. But I cannot get over these ostrich. The models for the ostrich are just so cool. And granted, I've played this game for about a year and a half. I've never used the ostrich, never used the giraffe, never used the Thompson's gazelle. So I'm just like beyond excited about all of these different models. And so one thing that I've, to get back on track here, one thing that I really had to grapple with were these overpasses, these land bridges. And as you can see, especially on this side, I went ahead and I lowered the fencing, or I got rid of the fencing on this side completely. Let's get right through all the rocks there. This is our newer southern entrance. And there's two things that happened. One, the fence was really in the way, and you don't get these amazing views of the animals as they're crossing over. But two, I was looking through all my reference footage of the San Francisco Zoo. I was going through like Google Maps trying to look at satellite imagery, and I couldn't see any fencing. And I realized after quite a bit of searching that they don't really have fencing on the overpasses in their exhibit. What they do have is live wire on the rocks. So essentially keeping the animals at bay. I believe the rocks are a little bit higher, but just because of how the ground works in this game, I had to keep them a little bit lower. And I went ahead and used, again, the electric fences here as live wire. It's not my favorite option, but it gives the impression of it, at least, better than any of the pieces we have in game. So if the animals are coming by here, really it was less about the giraffes. It was more about the Thompson's gazelle that I think is more where I was worried, because I did not want them to be jumping over and getting into things. So we added an extra layer of rocks and plants and the live wire over here, the hot wire, just to kind of make sure that the animals are not jumping up here and really hurting themselves, because honestly what it comes down to is we don't want them to hurt themselves. So I went ahead and did that on both sides. I think it actually looks really nice. It doesn't take away too much from the pathway there. It still is quite a large pathway to get across. I could have probably made that a little smaller, but I like that the animals feel comfortable to just hang out there. And so we've got that, and up here we have our sort of trough here for our water barrier for the monorail. And so the monorail comes up and goes back into these rocks over here, kind of goes through the forest over through to where the Australia buildings are. And I think that this turned out really cool. I was not sure for a while that this was going to work out, that this was going to look good, but especially with the new plaster blocks, which have kind of a rounded edge and aren't as sharp as the plaster pieces that we had before in the base game, I think it just really looks nice. Not only does it give it another watering hole. Oh, hello. It gives 2 watering holes for the animals, but also totally opens up this view as you're coming across in the monorail. And funny thing with the fencing, I actually got the fencing idea from the Oakland Zoo, though I know a lot of zoos that have giraffes use this sort of idea, but they have kind of this berm behind the giraffe exhibit, and they've got the fencing, and you don't really even notice it because the fencing kind of goes away and just the plants shine through. And so just on the other side there, we've got our backstage access, and we've got a backstage wall here, again with those plaster pieces, those brand new ones. I'm loving these. The only thing I don't like so much is that they've got a little bit of a wobble to them. As you can see, that there's kind of like it kind of is not completely even, and I had the biggest problem with that when I was trying to put signage and stuff on these, because I'm trying to sink things into the wall and some pieces are still poking through. But for what this purpose is for using it for concrete, it really sets the tone nicely, even more so than the original pieces that we had in game. Well, it's really cool. I keep finding myself just flabbergasted by this exhibit, just the way that the plants all came together and the animals. I'm just so excited by this. So if we could zoom back out here, sound effects, that's my specialty. As you can see here, we've got our deck that we've built. We've got the entrance through and out. Right over here is where we're going to be putting that hoofstock barn, the giraffe barn really, specifically. Hoofstock are going to go over here. The canyon's going to come down. And I think my next step really is to focus on, I think I'm going to focus on getting the entryway here finalized, which is going to be pathing, which is my absolute favorite part of this game. Sarcasm. And so we're going to do that first, I think. Then we're going to get into the barn and this whole area with the aviary. And I think that'll be our phase 2, probably ending with a little bit of the backstage here for the gazelle and the ostrich. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes phase 1 of the Open Savanna exhibit. I hope you all really enjoyed our time in this exhibit. I've been just having the best time putting this all together, because African animals are definitely my favorite things to go see at the zoo. The giraffes being probably number 3 after the rhinos and the elephants, which I'm again really excited to get into later. But if you enjoyed this video and want to see more of the builds as it continues, I hope that you'll subscribe to me. Please just hit the subscribe button. It'll let you know when I've made something new and cool. And as always, folks, I will see you in the next game.